Acquisition alert! Acquisition alert! PSA's parent company, Collectors, is acquiring Beckett. Beckett is going to be bought out, and while they remain an independent brand and utilizing their own operations, I do expect Beckett over the next couple of years to slowly die out and become a husk of their former self, because that's kind of what happened to SGC, which is another grading company that PSA bought just last year. PSA's parent company, Collectors, has reached an agreement to acquire the grading competitor Beckett, the company announced just this Monday. This is a huge deal because this pretty much means that PSA is kind of the de facto grader for the whole entire Pokemon card market. PSA now owns 80% of the grading Pokemon card market, which is an absolutely gargantuan number of cards. If you look at the numbers for November, PSA is grading 1.66 million cards every single month, which is a massive number. The only other grading competitor that comes even close is CGC, and CGC is really good at grading a ton of bulk cards. However, CGC has had their share of controversies as well. They are not a perfect grader. We can dive deeper into that later. But Beckett was always a very popular option, and a big reason for that is because if you have a really rare Pokemon card, if you have a really expensive card, if you have a gem mint card, then one of the most popular graders was with BGS because of the prestige of Beckett Pristine 10s and Black Label cards. They can go for 10x, 20x, 30x multiplier over a PSA graded slab, and that's because Beckett has a lot of prestige over them. So while Beckett is a much smaller grader in terms of total volume of cards that they grade, Beckett has always been seen as a gold standard in terms of how critical they get when they actually grade cards. They don't really often make a lot of mistakes, so that's a very popular option. And you can see some of the less popular graders. Tag is a new grader, but they are growing by volume quite a bit, so kudos to them. And SGC is one of the subsidiary of PSA, and as you can see, they are a husk of their former selves. SGC is never ever gonna compete with the big boys because they are owned by PSA, and there is no world where PSA would let SGC thrive. Any competitive edge, any marketing, any goodwill that SGC has, it's going to be siphoned by PSA, because there's no world where you would allow a second company to compete with yourself. That just doesn't make sense. You don't want to compete with yourself. You don't want to split your customer base. If there's someone out there that is interested in grading Pokemon cards, you want to send them to one grader. It's just so much easier than having multiple grading service. And an easy way to off your competitor or eliminate them instead of having to compete with them and slowly win over customers through the right way, which is the proper way to do it, is that, hey, PSA should have fantastic service. And if they have fantastic service and everyone uses PSA, then over time, Beckett, SGC, CGC, and all these other graders will lose business because there's clearly a best company. And over time, these other graders will die out. PSA cannot compete on quality. And if PSA cannot compete on Beckett's quality, an easy way to eliminate your competition is to just buy them out. Because now if you own them, you can slowly siphon their resources. So I do expect over the next couple of years, if you're grading with BGS, it's probably still going to be possible, but they are going to be a husk of their former self, which is their grading service is going to slow down a lot. Their customer service is going to slow down a lot. Any goodwill they have will slowly be siphoned by PSA, and that's just the way it's going to work. So yeah, you can see SGC as it's gone. Like it barely exists now that PSA has taken it over, and this is all within 1 year of them owning SGC. So I expect over the next couple of years, the name Beckett and its brand recognition is just going to slowly die out, which is really unfortunate. If you look at the grading numbers by category, there was a point in time when trading cards was a miscellaneous category. TCG used to be the underdog. No one graded TCG, and now you can see based on the numbers, TCG is the most popular category by far. It's not even close. TCG is 5 times bigger as a market compared to baseball, football, basketball. If you combine every single other category, you still don't even get close to half of the market of the TCG side. So that's why a lot of people are really, really focused on these numbers. If you look at some of the other numbers like CGC and TAG, they pretty much only grade TCG because no one is grading their baseball cards or football cards or anything else with any of these other grading service. And that kind of makes sense. And a big portion of that is because sports has just been around for a long time. And SGC is actually well known for being a big sports grader. They're really good at sports, which is why their sports numbers is actually the highest compared to their TCG number. In fact, they're the only grading company where sports is the more popular category compared to TCG. Almost every other grader has fully converted into being a TCG grader. So what does this mean for the market? I don't think there's a world where CGC ever sells out to PSA, but like I said, CGC has their problems as well. If you haven't heard, just this summer, CGC was caught in a massive scandal where they had to recall over 1,500 cards because they graded 1,500 beta test Pokemon cards as incorrect. They graded over 1,500 cards and said, hey, these cards are absolutely legitimate. These are actual playtest cards that were used to create the Pokemon TCG. But it turns out they didn't do their due diligence. Most of these cards were actually printed within the last year, so they are brand new fakes. And I don't know how this gets past CGC. The fact that they could not tell that these cards were fake really, really blunders their credibility. It's that they were focused more on the money, they were focused more on the prestige of being the first ones to get to grade these playtest cards, and they did not do their due diligence, and that really hinders their credibility. So I personally would not grade that many cards with CGC, and that's a big hindrance. If you're someone out there and you're grading millions of dollars of fakes, how credible is your grading service really? TAG has their own flaws as well. I'm not a huge fan of their slab. I think that their slabs do have problems. It's kind of just hard to read a TAG slab, and if you think a TAG slab is cool because it's transparent, then go ahead, love that slab, but that's not for me. The fact that the labels are hard to read for me. In fact, if you put a white piece of paper behind a TAG slab, it's impossible to read the grade. And that, to me, is enough of an issue for it, is that they haven't figured out their slabs. And if they want to keep doing those slabs forever, that's fine, but it's not for me. So they have their own flaws as well. I do not love how consolidated the grading market is. It should be more competitive. The more grading companies we have, the better, because it's much more competitive. These companies have to compete on prices. These companies have to compete on credibility, quality, but PSA is no longer having to do that. They don't have to compete on quality because they've taken off some of their biggest competitors. Beckett is probably their biggest competitor outside of CGC. CGC gets graded a lot of bulk. Right now, people are shoveling bulk cards to CGC. So while they're grading a ton of cards, they're not grading the best cards. And Beckett was always known for prestigious cards. Is that if you have a really, really nice pristine gem mint, Charizard, Mewtwo, Pikachu, any SIR, you're sending it to Beckett because if you get a black label, that card's probably worth 5, 6, 7, 8 grand, who knows? So prices on Beckett cards always had a massive prestige, and the fact that Beckett and now SGC being gone was not that big of a deal. In fact, PSA buying SGC makes a lot of sense because PSA is now a full TCG grader, and they could push a lot of their sports business to SGC because SGC was always known for sports. But nowadays, it's very clear SGC is like doesn't even exist. It's pretty much a defunct company to me personally at this point, and most likely PSA is going to do something similar to Beckett, which is really, really unfortunate. Over the next couple of years, I do expect grading popularity with Beckett will slow down significantly. They're not going to be competition anymore for PSA, and that's a big deal. So let me know your thoughts on this story, because obviously PSA has had a ton of controversy, but there are issues with pretty much all of these graders. They have their own flaws and problems, and that's okay. The fact that they all have their pros and cons makes it great for the market, is that as a collector, you have different options. So you can pick, okay, do I want the cheapest, most budget option? You would go with CGC. Do I want the fastest option? You might want to go with TAG because their service is currently the fastest. Do I want to go with the most prestigious like Beckett? Or do I want to go with the most liquid, which is PSA? now you have less and less options to work with, and that's never fun for a collector. So let me know what your thoughts are. This is kind of a wild story. I didn't expect Beckett to be bought out. Clearly, it was always possible. I don't think CGC will sell out. CGC is way bigger, especially in the comic book market, where they actually completely dominate. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.